Well, I do see that people are still filing in, so but I think we're going to get started. We've got 3 o'clock Central Time, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, so we will get started today. We've got "Don't Be Another Corporate Social Media Horror Story" on deck for you today. We've got Michael Dunn with FBC Mortgage, as well as Melissa Thomas with Active Comply, and they're going to have a very lively conversation for us regarding all things social media. And but before we get started, I want to give you some information about some of our other platforms. We've got TMC Connect that you're on right now. We've got Ask TMC, where the lender members can ask questions to their peers. And we've got TMC Benchmark. So if you're interested in any of our other platforms, please feel free to talk with your member engagement team, and they will assist you with that. Shameless plug for our 12 days of TMC. This is our virtual event that we've got going on December the 1st through December the 18th. So please come to themortgagecollaborative.com and take a look at what we've got in store for you. It's going to be great. Don't be another corporate social media horror story. We've got Melissa Thomas, who's head of compliance with Active Comply. And we've got Michael Dunn, who's general counsel for FBC Mortgage. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Whether you've joined us via your computer or your phone, everybody's muted. But we do want this to be interactive. So please use the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen to give us your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be reading those out as we go along. So Michael, Melissa, thank you guys so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you
for having me.
Excellent.
Happy to be here too. You know, Mike really set the stage for a spooky webinar. Hard to beat that.
I love it. I love that. He said he couldn't find a witch's hat though, but the house is fantastic.
Grade A prop, Mike.
Grade A. Well, we're going to get started. We're going to just kind of do a little conversational. I'm going to throw some questions at both Mike and Melissa, and they're going to give you some incredible information back. So we're going to start with Mike because we're going to put him on the spot. So Mike, why did you feel that social media monitoring was important for FBC Mortgage?
Well, for us, it was important because we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know what was out there necessarily on the internet that loan officers and potentially even other staff members had out there. We didn't know if there was web pages, for example, that they had. We didn't know what they were doing on social media. We started to get an increase in questions from regulators and auditors regarding our social media compliance policies. So when we were starting to get those questions more consistently in state audits and in our warehouse and investor audits, that's when we really started to realize, okay, this is a real thing. Regulators are on top of this. We need to be on top of this. We need to have a monitoring program. And so that's where we fell. We also had a few of those horror stories that you alluded to. These things tend to come up. You tend to get software as a compliance person. You tend to get software after you learn a valuable lesson about why you needed the software. So that's part of the reason why we approached Active Comply.
Excellent. Thank you. Melissa, how about you? What guidance is out there for lenders like Mike regarding the use of social media?
Sure. So, you know, I think very often social media isn't thought about as mortgage advertising. But in 2013, which feels like a lifetime ago, especially after the pandemic has gone on for so long. You know, the FFIEC, which is made up of some familiar faces like the CFPB, the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, they issued guidance around social media policies for mortgage lenders. And really, the idea is that there should be a risk management process in place. So what that really means is lenders are responsible for measuring, monitoring, and even controlling the risks related to social media and their brands. this policy is supposed to be commensurate with, the size of your social media presence and the size of your business. And so, that can be quite difficult if you have 300 LOs and each LO has 2 social media accounts and they post twice weekly. That's a lot for one person to monitor, let alone one department. So there are a lot of opportunities out there for automation of this. And then, on top of, the FFIEC, there's also, state record retention requirements. So just as, you would normally have your marketing department keep on file brochures and pamphlets related to advertising, so too should you be keeping, advertisements on social media on file. So, different states have 2, 3, 4-year record retention guidelines that you have to keep in place. So it's important to have automation to keep that, on file in case a regulator ever comes in and says, hey, show me, from this date to this date, the past 2 years. And then on top of, record retention and FFIEC, there's also guidance around just general advertising for mortgage lenders. So if you're a Virginia mortgage lender and your LO is advertising refinance, information and product offerings, there's specific verbiage that needs to go in that post or in that associated image. So it can get kind of messy if you're not having an eye on it.
That's on their business as well as their personal page if they're using that.
So true.
Page. Yeah.
So true. And so that's why it's important to not only train, your individual salespeople, but make sure that your marketing department feels prepared.
Right. Great. Thank you. Well, and so Michael, what was your biggest concern or your biggest concerns about the social media that was being used in your office with your staff?
Well, I try to think of compliance matters in terms of kind of big picture items versus, kind of the smaller housekeeping type items. So things like putting our NMLS number on making sure our NMLS numbers were on the web pages properly, and the equal housing lender logo and any state verbiage. Those are important, but the bigger issues, as far as I'm concerned, in my seat, in the chair that I sit in, are potential RESPA violations and the company's reputation and who's out there acting as a loan originator that doesn't have a license potentially. So those are the issues a lot more than, did I put the right NMLS number on the Facebook page? Those are the bigger issues that I didn't feel like we had a good grasp on with just hiring an intern to monitor our Facebook page. You know what I mean? So we needed a more robust system to feel comfortable about what was going on out there with our loan officers and our other staff for that matter.
Those interns, they always get that shtick, don't they?
Well, they know about the face page better than I.
The face page. Succinctly put. To that point, Mike, I think that you're right. Housekeeping items are important and they definitely need to be maintained. Active Comply, we've seen a variety of, fraudulent accounts using, lender branding, as well as, different websites where, an LO has been sending consumers to their own application portal to make sure that they keep their leads no matter where they go. But, that GoDaddy website isn't licensed appropriately. IT didn't know about it. It's not secure. So those are big picture items as well.
Yeah. Melissa, so when we're talking about issues, what are the biggest issues that lenders have on social media? You just mentioned a couple.
maybe I went a little too quick. I think that the first thing that I think most people care about when they come and see us at Active Comply is those housekeeping items. Are my LOs representing us like they should be? And so, when it comes to individual social media profiles, that's really just an electronic business card. So are we hitting, the basic checkboxes? Is the equal housing logo or verbiage displayed appropriately? A lot of LOs get away with this, on their cover photo, and we always recommend that. That's a great place to put it. Are the NMLS numbers listed? Not just, the company, an individual LO, but some states require branches. So that's something to take into account. Monitoring for those kind of stickier items that Mike mentioned, Are there any instances where there could be a potential kickback happening? Because regulators are constantly looking for that. Is your LO sharing the same builder post over and over and over again, or resharing the same realtor, with no kind of context? And that can be big, and it's a shared advertisement, and it benefits one party or the other, and so there can be some issues. And so we get asked that question a lot about, RESPA and the sharing of those items. And what we always say, and I think that LOs particularly love this, is, you need to be a narcissist. You need to make this post about you and the product that you're offering, about, you being the lender. So, maybe you're sharing a particular realtor's post, and that's great. Just make sure that you're saying, hey, to my audience, I'm going to be at this open house on Saturday from 2 to 4. Please stop in so we can talk about, different loan products that might be a great fit for you. So, making sure that it's about what you're doing and not just about this particular realtor, and also making sure that you're kind of diversifying that sharing profile. So, don't share the same people over and over again, because that can make a stronger argument for a RESPA violation. And then finally, we're in an election year. So, there's quite the combination of, here's how I feel about this social justice movement. But, my name on my profile also says ABC Mortgage, So it's conflicting when you have personal opinions that's kind of interacting with a company's branding. And it's important to make that wall of separation. And so what we always say at Active Comply is that, it's great that you have that First Amendment right, and we highly encourage it, but we do believe a degree of separation is important. So make a business profile separate from your personal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because those do get ugly sometimes.
There's inappropriate language. We recently had one particular guy who was using his Twitter, and he was very upset with Ticketmaster. And so there was all kinds of rosy language. And I do understand, because I have been there, but it just wasn't appropriate for that particular account, I think.
Yes, those people at Ticketmaster, they're trouble. Mike, can you kind of give us an overview of the social media risk management process there at FBC?
Sure. So, we have an overall risk assessment that we do every year on an annual basis, and part of that risk assessment is advertising reviews, and part of that is fair lending, compliance, state rule compliance, and so it's buried within our larger compliance management policy. We do have a separate standalone advertising and social media policy document that seemed to be probably about 4 or 5 years ago was when regulators and investors, warehouse banks really started to come asking us for those standalone policies. So we do have that as a standalone policy. We purchased the software, and we have a program within the software now that monitors how we do corrective actions. So that's really important for auditors and anybody who's coming in to evaluate our compliance management system to see is not just that we're identifying violations or have a process in place to identify violations, but that we have a process in place to stop them before they happen. If they do happen, then one gets through the cracks. We have a corrective action. We document, well, what did you do with that? Okay, this is what you did with this. This is how you cleared it. This took you 3 days. Good. That's what we wanted to see, was a clear kind of audit trail, right, for the regulators.
That is definitely
to that point. Sorry, Tony.
No, go ahead.
To that point, it is so important to document the corrective action and say, here's what happened. Here's how swift we were with that corrective action. And part of that is, the documentation, so you can go to an LO and say, based on this policy, here's where you went wrong, or maybe you need a little bit of help, so you can reference it when you reach out to the LO, because sometimes they're the only ones who can make the updates. And we also have, at the end of this webinar, one of the things that all of the attendees are going to get is a LO social media compliance cheat sheet. So we've made it easy for LOs to say, here are some simple do's, some don'ts, tips and tricks. But we feel that it's, if you want to be social media compliant, it starts with your sales force.
Absolutely. Well, we did have a question come in. Actually, it's kind of a two, maybe three questions. So can Active Comply monitor image copy on the social media for compliance purposes?
Image copy. So I'm going to take that to mean, just any images
Yep.
that are associated with a post. And the answer is yep. So, we're scanning social media posts as well as the images affiliated with those posts for industry trigger words. And that includes superlatives like best or greatest, as well as, things like rate or APR, reverse. So if it's, in any kind of way an advertisement towards a mortgage lending product, we're going to pull it in. We're also going to isolate where we found the word. Sometimes the program will say, we found rate. And I'm like, where? And it's really small, tiny. Once I open up the image, oh, it's in the disclosure. So there's a lot of capability there.
Excellent. And then the additional question is, do you monitor the personal pages of the LOs that are tied to mortgage lenders that they work for?
Sure, that's a great question. So when it comes to personal pages, this is true for Facebook and Instagram. Instagram was recently purchased by Facebook, so they are twin sisters in this scenario. When it comes to personal pages, we do offer that functionality through an invitation link. So an LO has to enable access. I'm sure that many of you have seen Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress and how awkward that was. But because of that, Facebook has really tightened their privacy policy when it comes to individual pages. This is true for all of the competitors in the industry. Anybody who offers this kind of product has to do a 60-day authorization. So the LO says, yep, I grant you access, but they have to do it every 60 days. It can be quite tedious. And I'm sure that many of the participants know that if it's not pay related, it's quite difficult to get an LO to agree. So it's our best practice to say, there's an easy way to transfer your whole network over to a business page. It's safer and it protects the company's branding. So that's what we would highly encourage.
So every 60 days they have to go in and say that, yes, you can view my Facebook page.
Every 60 days, it can sometimes expire. But again, it goes against the terms of service for Facebook and Instagram for you to advertise in this way. And it means that if you have certain policies in place, privacy policies on your individual page, if we can't see it, a regulator can't see it when it comes to, are you licensed appropriately? Do you have that state verbiage? So it creates equal problems.
Right. Wow.
The more you know.
Yeah, that's right. And then how has it changed with the pandemic, social media use? What has 2020 brought to the social media realm?
Oh man, like my own individual feeds have just completely changed, I feel like. So from the data that we've seen from sources like Forbes or the Wall Street Journal, nationwide since January, there's been an average of about 27% increase in social media usage nationwide. And within the aggregate data that we've collected at Active Comply regarding the industry, individual LOs as well as companies, we've seen that there's been a 39% increase in social media usage, with individual postings increasing for all of those accounts. So we know that it's increased because we see that LOs are going where the consumer is going, which is fair. When you can't go meet up with a builder, you can't meet with a realtor, where are you going to go? You're going to go online. But where LOs go, so too do regulators, right? So with that in mind, we're keeping a close eye on the activity increase. We've seen a lot of banks and credit unions start to dive into the pool, start to get their toes wet. We've also, been monitoring the top 50 producers on the Scotsman Guide. So we're looking at the information and we're seeing that out of those top 50 producers from 2019, there was 88% of them that were utilizing social media for loan advertisements and self-promotion. So we know that top producers are going there, more and more people in the industry are going there, and so too our regulators with in-person on hold. So there's been an increase in activity generally. We've also seen an increase for our individual clientele that we're monitoring, increases in terms like forbearance, especially for those who handle their own servicing. And that can be quite tricky because you don't want to say the wrong thing. Things are already kind of high strung in that area to begin with. And we've also seen a huge spike, and I don't think you would have anticipated this, but a big spike in things like win or sweepstakes. So LOs are doing all kinds of gift card promotion.
Grabber kind of stuff.
Yeah, to get consumers' eyes, but sweepstakes have their own rules state by state as well. So, you know, they can't just throw that out there willy-nilly, and so we're monitoring for that.
Well, and you've mentioned Facebook and you've mentioned Instagram because they're the twin sisters now. But what other, I like that. And some people may see the evil twin sisters, I don't know.
Halloween.
Right. What other social media platforms do you guys monitor?
So we try to monitor everywhere that the mortgage industry is. So right now, currently, we're monitoring Facebook, Instagram. We're monitoring Twitter, which is where we see most of the rosy language, surprisingly. We're also looking at YouTube and the YouTube videos that get posted, Zillow, especially for reviews. And you wouldn't have anticipated it, but also Yelp. Yelp is where a lot of consumers are going to make reviews on mortgage companies. I had only ever used it for Chinese food, but you know, we're branching out now. And we've had a couple of lenders say that they're interested in Pinterest. You know, that's not necessarily on our radar as of yet. But you know, the more that we hear about it, the more we're looking into making that integration into the system. We also have a beta testing for LinkedIn, and it's part of our managed services department as well.
Okay. Excellent. Well, you're covering all the bases. I think
so far we're trying.
Mortgage loan officers aren't getting into TikTok. They're not, doing the dances for their advertisements yet. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. We're keeping our ear to the ground, and we're listening for what the lenders are looking for, and we're going to try and build solutions around that.
Excellent. And someone was just asking, so how can you monitor TikTok?
We cannot monitor TikTok, or it's kind of other sisters, Snapchat. Currently, a lot of that content is instantaneous. It's not saved. So it makes it quite difficult for the API to bring it in. One benefit, though, is that, likely the regulator can't save it. It's not permanent like Facebook or Instagram, where it's readily available. So that is one benefit for security.
Absolutely. So it looks like we are now to the horror story part of our presentation.
Mike, go fit in the house.
Who would like to go first?
Well, I got like 2 or 3.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so one of the things that the state regulators started doing with us, a few of the states approached us in this way. All of the states would typically make an announcement or send you a letter saying you're under examination. For the compliance folks on the call, they know how this works. Sometimes they do an intro call and they'll kind of walk through, okay, this is what we expect, here's our timeframes, etc. We had one state who we were going through the intro call and said, I'm getting ready to email you a document. And he emailed us a document, and he had, on the intro call, he had already done a full internet review of our company. I'm not sure which company he used. I think he probably used one of the social media monitoring companies out there to maybe do it. Maybe he didn't, but there was a report. It was a pretty sophisticated looking report, and it had all of our internet violations, including, any NMLS numbers that were missing, any specific verbiage, state required verbiage that was on there, any fair lending questions that he had. All of it was in a report that he had already done before he even started his examination. And that's what we went over on our initial call. And so what I gathered from that was that regulators, in just talking to him kind of just person to person, he basically described it as, well, if we go into a mortgage shop and we see that they are making a concerted effort to try to be as compliant as possible on with their advertising on the internet, things that are readily available for us to find on the internet, then we know, okay, these guys got a compliance department, they have their ducks in a row, they pay attention. But if there's a bunch of violations, then they know, okay, maybe these people don't have a good compliance department. Maybe they do need a deeper dive. And so that's just a way that he uses to kind of gauge a company's involvement or engagement with compliance. It's a good indicator for him. That's what he told us.
It's not a good conversation starter for an auditor, though.
No.
He's an overachiever. He was ready before.
But again, those were some of the smaller ticket items as far as I'm concerned. You know, maybe we didn't have an MLS number posted correctly or an equal housing lender logo. Those are easy fixes. Another horror story that we experienced was a loan officer who on his own decided to take a fishing trip with all of his favorite realtors and posted it all over social media and thank you for the business. Keep sending me your business. We're great business partners, blah, blah, blah. Here's this boat that I rented and all the booze that I bought for this party. And blah. It was just a thank you for business trip. And those are the types of things that keep me up at night, because if I find it, the dude without the face page, then a regulator is going to be able to find it. And it's one of those bigger ticket items that really could have an impact on a company and on that individual's ability to make a living. So
I don't know, Mike, that sounds like a educational webinar to me, you know, just out on a boat, hanging out.
He handed out some flyers on the boat. So,
oh, check.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, the issue is, you know, we probably all know these things happen and companies try to do their best to protect itself from it. But when you have your eyes on these different social media pages and these web pages, then you can really feel good about your monitoring program. So those are just two. I have like more, but.
and to that point, I think that, you know, it's important from a regulatory standpoint. You know, maybe he was a particular type of LO who thought this was a great idea. But if it went unchecked, you know, maybe he would be the inspiration for some of the other sales staff. And then it kind of could be somewhat of an outbreak. You know, he got away with it. He's been really successful. Maybe I'll implement, you know, something like that. Maybe I'll take them go-karting or something. So good to nip it in the bud, I'm sure, as soon as you can.
Oh, for sure. Well, and before we get to Melissa's horror story, because I know that she has maybe one or possibly 2 or 50 to share, just want to do a reach out and see if there are any questions from the audience. Please know that you can type those into the chat or the Q&A box, and we will be reading those. And also, you all will receive a follow-up email from this webinar, and it will have a copy of this discussion for you or instructions on how to access that. And that will be coming to you tomorrow. And Melissa has alluded to the cheat sheet that she will be also providing for all of the attendees. So Melissa, you can share your cheat sheet or share your story and then share your cheat sheet.
Sure, I'll lead with some of the spooky content.
There you go.
Right to the cheat sheet. So to set the stage, the scenario is that, you know, there's an individual LO and, you know, and he's been quite successful and he's partnered with a local in town credit repair agent. And I'm sure that all the participants right now are going, ding, 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 credit repair. You know, so that's quite the trigger word for compliance. You know, but, you know, the LO probably had the best intentions at heart. He wanted to, you know, do the best that he could for his clientele. But what LOs don't know is that credit repair is its own industry altogether and that it's highly regulated. And that's important to remember, you know, standalone, just to keep in mind. But what was happening is, you know, they were partnering together and they had individual YouTube channels where they would self-promote together and they would post videos saying, you know, here's the process, you know, you come to me for a loan and we're going to go ahead and pull your credit for the loan. I'm going to give Bob the credit report so he can walk you through, you know, how to best get the best loan possible for you. And so for anybody who's involved in the mortgage industry knows, you know, to pull a credit report, you have to have a specific reason. You need to stay within that reason, you know, and for this point, it's for the loan. It's not for credit repair. And the consumer likely didn't consent to that. So, you know, Bob was getting that credit report and making recommendations, and they posted that, you know, social media video on YouTube Sunday night. And, you know, I'm sure that you're thinking, oh, regulator gonna find it. And that is important to regulators, you know, as well. But Monday morning, They didn't get a email from a regulator. The lender got an email from the credit bureau itself, where they had sent watchdogs out, and the watchdogs looked for that exact kind of scenario. And so the credit bureau sent an email over saying, here's a link to what we found. This is unacceptable. Make sure that it's taken down. Please speak to the LO so it doesn't happen again. If we do see it happen again, we're going to revoke your access to the credit bureau for 30 days. And I don't know a lender alive that can operate without, credit access for 30 days. So, with that in mind, that was incredibly scary. And so, of course, they were able to speak to the LO and overcome the obstacle, and that was great. But it was quite scary for them in the interim, I'm sure. So that's one instance where, we're thinking about regulators, but there are also other players in the arena to take into mind. A scenario that we've had at Active Comply that we hadn't anticipated, it's one of my favorite stories. We had a lender who came on board. One of the things that they wanted to make sure all of their individual LOs had company marketing branding on both the cover photo as well as the profile photo. And that's fair, to have your branding represented. And they wanted to make sure that if an LO updated those photos, they wanted to be notified so they could have them correct that. So we set up that kind of technology, we built it in, we flipped on the switch, and not a week later, the lender received an email, saying so-and-so top producing LO has changed their cover photo. Well, lo and behold, the LO had changed it to a competitor's branding before he had put in his 2 weeks. So that was quite the sight to see. So before he left, they were able to shut down his access, make sure none of those leads had any issues. It was a great way to avoiding kind of future lawsuits that might have to ensue and entanglements. So it was one kind of scenario that we hadn't anticipated, but it was great that we were able to provide that to the lender and to our clients. So, it's important to know that social media can be quite volatile in a variety of ways. And so you should be looking out for, not only regulatory issues, but, things with your vendors, as well as individual salespeople.
Right. Well, cart before the horse.
Right.
That was a good catch, though. That's
surprising. We were
great for
shocked.
Active Comply. Right. As well as
Sure.
the client, for sure.
So now I can share the cheat sheet with everybody. I'd be happy to do so. Want to make sure everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is kind of a preview of what we give our clientele to disseminate to their loan officer staff. It should be a referenceable cheat sheet for them. It has really quick do's and don'ts. We include do's so that LOs don't feel so trapped, because I'm sure they're tired of compliance wagging their finger no, but they would like to know, what can I do? And so we've made that really easily accessible to the LO within this guide. It also means that there's uniformity, between your sales staff and your compliance team. Everybody's on the same page. So with this in mind, one of the first things we talk about is profile compliance. So, some of the housekeeping items we've talked about is, make sure the NMLS IDs are listed, equal housing is appropriately listed, if there's a branch ID that's applicable, things of that nature, especially individual state information. So for example, California just recently updated, I think it was September 26th, don't quote me, but they updated, their regulatory body there, which was really a mini CFPB. So that means that all of California's licensed MLOs needed to update, their state verbiage on their profiles. So it's just one of the ways that, you have to be on the cusp of social media when it comes to, regulatory issues. But beyond, regulations and kind of state by state, there's also company policies that you can put into place. So some of our lenders, I think most notably FBC, Mike, requires that privacy policies are displayed on every LO page. And that's a great best practice, especially for California LOs where privacy policies are huge for consumers. I know that many lenders also require NMLS consumer access be included. This is a requirement for Washington State LOs to have NMLS consumer access included. And so there's a lot of niche things which comes with each state that are just best practice altogether. And so we've included those here in the cheat sheet.
That's great.
Next is, kind of the meat and potatoes, so post-compliance. These are the don'ts, which are unacceptable practices. And I think that it's a best practice overall. And many of the lenders that we work with employ this. Don't be specific. Don't talk about individual mortgage products that are offered, because the more specific that you get as an LO, the more disclosures that have to be affiliated with that. So it's a best practice to speak in broad brushstrokes as best you can while being safe. And if you do have a specific product offering that an LO is really pushing for, that's perfectly fine, but they should partner with their legal and compliance department and marketing department to get those materials right before they get posted. That way nobody has to take anything down later on. Some of the things that we see very often at Active Comply is, an LO will post, oh, contact me for, 3% on this, particular loan product. Every percent that's being represented for the loan product has to be displayed as an APR. It's important verbiage that needs to be associated. And I think it gets missed a lot because it's not thought of as important, but that needs to be stressed. And then, just kind of maintain a professional page. You didn't think that it had to be said, but you would be surprised at some of the findings. So maintain the professional page, which means don't be posting about drugs or alcohol. Make sure that it's business appropriate attire, things of that nature. Also, keeping personal opinions about social justice movements or the election, that's important to keep out so that you're not alienating any specific group of consumers. We also include within the guide kind of a profile example. Here is my debut as a MLO. You're the first to hear. And it gives an overview of what a profile should look like. Now, when we have lenders come on board, we'll start to talk to them about what is some of the policies that you have in place already. And we started to offer this guide to our existing clientele where it says, how do you want us to modify this so that it competes with what you're saying. We're adding some supplemental coverage and you can distribute this. So, maybe this particular guide would say, FBC Mortgage LLC and put the legitimate, NMLS number of the company. And so it makes it easy for us to disseminate it to LOs, and especially for those older crowd who may not take advantage of social media or know it quite as fluently. Those more senior LOs, we help walk them through how to make those changes. That can be quite tedious. I'm sure there's a compliance person or two on here who spent maybe an hour with one LO trying to get something updated. Well, you got to delete your cookies, something along those lines. So we offer, additional support, but, this guide will be available to all of the attendees afterwards.
That is great information. Thank you so much, Melissa. And that is, that's fantastic. Just to have it there. So right at your fingertips, checklist, do's and don'ts. That is,
Sure.
that's definitely worth the entrance fee for this webinar. So thank you for sharing that with everyone.
It's made our job easier, definitely, just to say, here are some referenceable guides. Here's a quick step-by-step with screenshots. Say, here's what you do next. And we're keeping up with those updates. Instagram just had an update where they offer business accounts, and that can be quite tricky. They're telling you to link to a Facebook, how confusing, things get missed, but we do our best to assist.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to check and see. I don't see any other questions. With that, I want to thank Melissa. Thank you, Mike, for spending this time with us and sharing your expertise with the TMC network. Couldn't do this without you guys, and the collaboration that we have with the lender members and the partners is truly appreciated. So thank you. And also thank you to the attendees. Thank you so much for being on the call, and you're getting the do's and don'ts. You're getting the checklist. So definitely worth it. There will be a follow-up email that comes tomorrow, so please check that out. It'll have information about how to access the video because this is being recorded. And just going to check. Thank you so much for all of the valuable info was the last chat we got. So appreciate it. Have a great day. Have a great, tomorrow's Friday. So wonderful weekend, and very much appreciate you guys. So thanks so much.
Yeah, glad to be a part of it. I hope everybody learned a little bit vicariously from some of these horror stories. And I hope that it makes some actionable items for you you know, maybe tomorrow, or maybe you'll wait till Monday.
Right. It sounds good. Well, very much appreciate it. Thanks, you guys. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye-bye.